quality is key to business excellence. It's about delivering what your customers require right first time, every time. I think it's great that we're celebrating Business Excellence Awards in the background right now, and we're rewarding improvement efforts of the teams at Sellafield Limited.
As I go through the 14 points, what I'd like you to do is to think to yourself, what have we done in our company? How good have we been on what Deming came out with? Toyota, as an example to compare with, they started all of this in 1950. And typically in Japan, every year they have over 2,600,000 improvement suggestions, of which 96% are implemented. That's an average of 40 improvement suggestions per month per employee. Can you imagine something like that within the structure or the culture you currently have in your organisation? Are you even remotely near it? No. If not, then why, and what might you do about it? What is the new philosophy? Ishikawa said that each individual, as it says there, is the expert in his or her own job. What we've got to do is to use the collective thinking power and job knowledge of all of our people to work towards making us the best in our business. A lot of people depend on ISO 9000. ISO 9000, there's nothing wrong with ISO 9000, there's an awful lot wrong with the way we use it. Training on the job. We're pretty awful at training. What we try to do generally is to try and buy people from somebody else who spent the money on the training. And that's one of the reasons for immigration. Some other countries spent the money on the training and we try and get it for nothing. Is that morally right? I don't think so. So we ought to take note of the new philosophy and some of these other things, say, okay, I've got to get my people to rather work here than somewhere else. Am I doing that? I don't know. In some companies, in some societies, when we get promoted, we say, now I've got power over all of those people and I can strut around saying, you do this, you do that, and you do something else. In the new philosophy, when we get promoted, we say, I'm now responsible for the enjoyment of life of all of those extra people. Is that the culture in our organisation? We've got to try and create a no-blame society in our company. Because how many people do you know wake up in the morning and say, what can I screw up today? You've got to attack problems, not people. What people need to know is, one, what is expected of them. Second is the means of doing good work. The third is the means of checking their own work to see if it's good enough, and then the means of closing the gap between what they are doing and what they need to do. And if any one of those four elements isn't there, the management job's incomplete, and people will carry on making rubbish indefinitely because they don't know what to do different. Ishikawa said, quality begins and ends with education. When we got involved a lot with companies with quality circles, one thing that people used to say was, once we started quality circles, a lot of problems just disappeared. They didn't become projects or anything, and we used to call it the sprinkling of magic dust effect. It was because they didn't realise those things were important before, but now, through this process and education and so forth, they suddenly realise why things are important. And finally, from Deming, putting everybody in the company to work to accomplish the transformation. It's everybody's job. When I put this together and I was thinking around it, I then thought, well, okay, that was back in '86. What would be the situation today? Because things have moved along. Outside of work, quality is a lovely word, isn't it? And we use the word quality in our everyday lives, but somehow or other when we use it in business, it's got this picture in our head of compliance, ticking boxes and so forth. We've got to get it back to something that we get pride. It's our self-esteem. It's something where we are the best. Our reputation depends on it. I am proud of the company I work for because it's really good at what it does. I worked in an iron foundry through the 1950s, and I was lucky enough in some respects to do national service. And when I came out of the army, I decided I wasn't going to go back into the world that I'd been in before. And I went down to sign on at night school to do what in those days was the ordinary national certificate of mechanical engineering. At the end of that year, I got 97% for maths, 93 for science, and 87 for technical drawing. You'd think I would be pleased, wouldn't you? I was livid. I tell you, I've never been more cross in my life, because if anything demonstrated to me that I had academic ability before, but because of circumstances, it never got discovered by anyone else. I look at all of those thousands and thousands of people that are leaving our schools every year, going into work with no self-confidence, no self-belief. They don't know what they can do. Nobody else particularly cares. And for me, that is awful, because that is a loss to society. If I hire a quality manager, pay him enough, I don't have to worry about quality anymore, let him get on with it. How many people think like that? The quality department can't be responsible for quality. They can only be responsible for helping those that are, and the person who's primarily responsible is the guy that runs the place. If we want things to get better, we have to isolate the things that we don't like. We've then got to have people who find the causes of why they aren't how we want them to be, find a remedy for the cause, implement the remedy, and then hold the gains afterwards, because we don't want to have to keep solving the same problems over and over. If I mention Marks and Spencer's, Next, British Home Stores, Littlewoods, in your own mind you will have your own personal ranking. Yours might not be the same as mine. It's the collective thing about that that gives it its reputation. That's the big Q. How you perceive that business. Would you buy shares in it? The small Q is the fact that I bought some printed circuit boards from you and one of the components was missing or something like that. That's the actual quality of production. We have to look at both. You look at these products down here, the iPhone, the iPad, the iTouch and so on. They weren't dreamed up by you or me. Some bright spark who knew his way around electronics and so forth thought this is a great idea. He launched it, and once we'd seen it, then we wanted it, but it had to be launched first. So quality is not necessarily determined by the customer. It's quite often determined by a perceptive research and developer, a creative person. I got a steel company that I worked with in Iran that ran into trouble with their big customer, Iran Khodro, which makes 1 million cars a year. And they said that we'd rather buy imported steel from Japan than from you, Mubarak's steel in Iran. Why? Because it's better quality. They were identical. So why did they have that perception of the Iranian steel? The reason was that the steel company in Iran was across the desert. It was as dry as dust when it was dust. So they didn't have to wrap the reels to take them to the car factory. But the Japanese ones came on a ship. So they had to put oil paper around the outside of them to keep the seawater off. They perceived that to be better quality, and yet the steel was the same. So Mubarak's steel started putting brown paper around the steel, and Iran Khodro said, your steel's improved amazingly, and they hadn't changed it. So don't forget perceptions. We got the Olympics coming up next year, and Mark Cavendish, who is now one of the world's greatest sprinters, and they interviewed him, and they said, what is your secret? What do you do? What he said is, I play chess. What has chess got to do with sprinting? He said, because I need to know where every other good sprinter is. I need to know what their strategy and tactics are. I need to know in an instant what they're actually doing, and I need to make a decision like that. And those are the things you need to think about in industry. You know what happened to Toyota? They got past General Motors, and then they ran into this dreadful product recall thing. Their target was to get to be world number one. They took their foot off the gas when they got to world number one. If you do get to the top, don't just sit back and get complacent. It's even tougher to be at the top and stay there than it is to get there in the first place. And finally, winners don't copy people. People copy winners. And if you want to be the winner, then you've got to do that sort of work. I can only say what Duran used to say at the end of all of his, and good luck.
Although we talk about World Quality Day, we've sort of used the strap that sort of every day is a quality day within AMEC. And it's just raising the awareness of what quality is about for people.